Hello everyone, my name is Brian Evans. About 2 years ago, my family and I were preparing to move to where we are living currently, and for a short period of time we had to live with my in-laws, and while doing so, one of the jobs I did was cutting the grass, and while doing that, trying to find something to pass the time while cutting, I found a video series done by a guy on YouTube by the name of John Heaton. And John, like myself, was a big music fan, a big Beatles fan. And I really enjoyed getting to hear his opinions and his reviews of albums that he did, as well as discussions about relationships the Beatles had. And particularly, I liked his discussion of the Beatles during the 1970s. Well, fast forward a couple of months. After watching many of his videos, I really became interested in how he got through his collection of albums, and how, as he talked about the different albums, he would show the album covers, and reminded me that when I was a lot younger, I collected some vinyl of Paul McCartney albums, and got me to go back and begin looking at those again. Fast forward to the COVID age and going through the pandemic, one of the things that my family and I did to pass the time was begin looking and began collecting vinyl albums. And one of the things that I thought about doing while watching others that were refinishing furniture or other things was maybe take the albums that I started collecting and begin reviewing them. Much in the same way that I've seen John Heaton do them. It's very neat. One of the things I really enjoy is the fact that a British expatriate in Hungary, his videos can inspire and bring thought to so many people, including me in the United States. And so I kind of got the motivation to begin kind of growing my own vinyl collection, and the idea of reviewing the ones that I collected. Now, I grew up not in the vinyl age, but in the cassette age, when I was really young and got into popular music. And then as I got in my teen years, I've seen the change from CDs and then into digital media. But really, I've become interested, I think, part of nostalgia and everything, with the vinyl. When I was very young, my parents still were collecting vinyl, had their vinyl collection. I've actually kind of began my own collection through some of the ones they let me borrow of bands that I remember liking from my childhood, growing up at home, of course. And so we're going to begin this process of reviewing my own albums. So the thing, obviously, to remember is that I'm by no means a professional musician or a professional music critic. I'm just a fan that enjoys vinyl and has access to recording equipment, and being inspired by others that have done the same thing online. So if you are watching this video, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the process. When I began this idea of recording myself and reviewing the albums, I decided very early on what album I was going to review first. Huge fan of the Beatles, and Paul McCartney is my favorite Beatle and my favorite solo artist as well. And so I knew that if I was going to start the review of my vinyl collection, which sits right now at close to 200, that would be McCartney's debut solo album, which is McCartney. Now, I actually picked up this album not terribly long ago, about a year and a half ago. I was able to find it. Just a quick note as we begin this process. The albums that I collect, I'm not necessarily looking for mint styles or things like that. Really just looking to find the albums that I like and enjoy. If I find one in great condition, that is a bonus. This McCartney album I've got is not the best of conditions. As you can see, it does have some wear, which does mean that it was in somebody's collection and they enjoyed it. Of course, this is the famous Apple label that it is on. Both sides on the Apple label, as you can see there. So McCartney, of course, was released in the middle of April of 1970, 51 years ago now. When I began the process, it was right around of deciding to do this. It was right at, around the 50th anniversary of the release of the album. And of course, if you were watching this video or interested in McCartney and the Beatles, the story is probably well known. An album that was controversial upon its release. Number one, because of the internal squabbles that the public did not know about among the Beatles themselves, with Paul kind of working in secret to release the album, and not really talking to the other members of the band that he was recording it until really the process was ended and he requested a release date. The release date was falling very closely to where Ringo was going to release an album, his solo album Sentimental Journey, as well as Let It Be, the album that Phil Spector had been working on without Paul McCartney's involvement in late 1969 and early 1970. Very interesting to read about that and really kind of see the bad blood that existed and really kind of expanded after the period. Eventually McCartney did get his way and it was released when he wanted, around the 17th or so of April of 1970. And of course famously he also released a Q&A with it that was released to the press rather than doing interviews. And in it, of course, he announced that he was done, at least for the time being, working with the Beatles. And that was, of course, the first time that it had been publicly acknowledged that the Beatles were, at least for that time, through. And that's one of the reasons that it courted so much controversy, and one of the reasons why people think that the album was not so highly rated by critics during this time period in 1970. Now the fans did kind of flock to it. It did reach number one in the United States for 1 week, the week of May the 3rd of 1970. It did reach number one. It got as high as number two in the UK. Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel kept it from reaching number one in the UK, and it surpassed Bridge Over Troubled Water for 1 week in the United States, getting it that number one ranking in McCartney's first of many number one albums that he had as a solo artist. A lot of interesting reads about this time period and the critics' panning of it. There's a lot of things that you don't even realize how important it was. Of course, not being alive at that time, just not even understanding. Number one, the impact the Beatles had in popular culture in the late 60s, by this time early 1970, and the idea that they were done as a recording band and the artists, the four members, were going their own separate ways. It probably would have been very traumatic as a music follower and a lover of music, and rightfully so. Music critics looked for somebody to blame, and because the other three Beatles seemed to be working in unison, as we will see in their later releases in the 70s. McCartney was kind of the odd man out, and we see that in the reviews of this album. I believe the reviews were quite unfair. I believe that as a standalone piece of music, it's very, very good, and I think it sits up very well as a good start to the McCartney solo career. The things that I've really enjoyed about the album, listening to it over the last, on vinyl for over a year, but of course the many years before is in my CD and digital music collection. I've always been very impressed with McCartney's ability to play all of the instruments, playing, obviously taking the drum kit, the lead guitar. His acoustic playing is really good. And for somebody that was, in many cases just plugging straight into the recording tape without a mixing board, without levels, the sound that he gets on the album, while certainly it does sound unfinished and raw, I do think it is a very well done album, especially the tracks that he did take the extra care on. That he did go and record a couple at Abbey Road in early 1970 under a pseudonym, so people wouldn't know that it was him. Those songs, I think, probably not surprisingly, are the strongest on the album. On side one, Every Night, and on side two is, of course, Maybe I'm Amazed. I think it's one of McCartney's, certainly not in the top five of his albums, but I think it's a solid top 10 album in his solo career. I think there's several highlights. If you look at side one, of course, the track that stands out is Every Night. I think that lyrically, it's a strong lyric, and musically, I think it's very well done. Again, he was able to mix it and record it on the 8-track mixing board and tape machine at Abbey Road Studios, and I think that he takes advantage of that. Very well mixed is the song Every Night. Great chorus, very, very good vocal by him as well. Also on side two, I think Junk is a song that stands out. I've always enjoyed Junk, even hearing it in its early days as a demo that he did with the Beatles, kind of in those 1968, 1969 sessions. Of course, did not end up as a Beatles track, but did make its way onto the solo McCartney album. I think Junk is, again, a vocal that I enjoy, and I think that musically it's very well done and very well recorded. And the song Man We Was Lonely I enjoy as well. I think it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek song, but one where you can tell that Linda and Paul are having fun and enjoying being together and enjoying recording. I definitely think side one is stronger than side two, even with the snippet of The Lovely Linda, which is only about 45 seconds long. Valentine Day and Hottest Sun and Glasses also are instrumentals on side one, not the strongest tracks. As a matter of fact, Paul later said that Valentine Day was actually almost ad-libbed in the studio. I read recently where he said that he was just kind of testing out the equipment when he recorded it. So, somebody with as much musical experience and somebody that had written so many monumental songs in the 60s, you might be surprised to see an artist like that releasing songs that are unfinished and kind of made up on the spot. But I think that's kind of the feel Paul was going for, and especially if you read now, looking back, as he has talked more about it, about the mindset that he was in, the lack of confidence perhaps that he had, and really kind of leaning on Linda and to look and find a new direction. I think that you can really see that in the songs on the album in that way. Side two, I think Ooh You is actually a pretty good song. I love the guitar riff on Ooh You. Paul may be seen as an underrated lead guitarist, though he did play several lead parts in his career with the Beatles, but I think he plays very well in Ooh You. And of course, a couple songs later, Maybe I'm Amazed, of course he plays the lead, which would become iconic when it was released in the mid-70s, and Jimmy McCulloch was able to play the lead guitar on it. But as I said, those are really Ooh You to me, and Maybe I'm Amazed are the songs that kind of stand out to me on side two. I'm not as big a fan of Teddy Boy as others are. It's kind of one of those story songs that McCartney is known so well for doing. Certainly not my favorite of the ones he's done. And Crina Core, which was the kind of the experimental drum track at the end, I'm not particularly fond of. Sing Along Junk, again, I love the song Junk, but kind of having it on the album twice, maybe taking up something that he could have done more effectively. But all told, for somebody that would explode during the 1970s as a solo artist and with Wings, and compared to what we will hopefully see later with both John Lennon and George Harrison, not the monumental, iconic piece that you might expect from a member of the Beatles coming right out in the way that All Things Must Pass would be, or John Lennon Plastic Ono Band would be, both released later, of course, in 1970. Quick look at the album. Of course, it is solo Apple label. This is a particular one, is an American Apple release. Gatefold, which I really like, and on the inside it's got all the pictures, I think 21 pictures that Linda took of he and Paul and young Mary, and of course Linda's child Heather from her first marriage. On the press release that McCartney gave out with the release of the album to the critics, he said the themes of the album were home, family, and love. Maybe not directly the words that you think of when you hear the album, but certainly kind of this back cover with this great picture in the twilight of Paul's first child, Mary, and he kind of shows that perhaps that's the way McCartney's life is going. Maybe the worst had been over and he kind of survived it as he's going through this very dramatic and traumatic for him, especially as you read about what he says, split with the Beatles. But again, I would say solid top 10 album in the canon of Paul McCartney releases that he's had. And certainly I think as time has gone on and has reached its 50th anniversary, an album that's much more appreciated now. For number one, for Paul's musical ability, playing all the instruments, some very good melodies on the album, but very strong opening, though not in the same league, of course, as John Lennon would have a Plastic Ono Band, and George would come very soon after with All Things Must Pass. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. As I said, my plan is to release these and go through my music collection. There's all different sorts of music that I'll go through, mostly through 60s and 70s and some 80s. But I look forward to you coming on this journey with me as we go through my vinyl collection. Talk to you next time. Thanks.